I came home from work. We both worked a lot of hours, and then would come home, and there were the life things of taking care of the family. And I came home, things were a mess. Kids hadn't started their homework, dinner wasn't started, I was late. And I remember I walked in the door, and I was a manager at work where I worked, and I was just used to taking charge of everything. And I walked in the door, and almost like I was just this managerial person in my own home, started demanding my kids to put their backpacks away. And my husband, if he checked the mail, and chastised him, why didn't he start dinner? It was all ready. And I just was so superior. And I remember I was standing at the stove, and he told me, he rarely pushed me on things because it would usually end up bad. And he turned around and he told me, "You are going to stop treating me like I'm one of your employees, or we're going to have a problem." And instead of getting the hint, I remember snapping back at him in defense. "Well, if you would just do what you knew you were supposed to do and I told you to do, then I wouldn't have to treat you like you were one of my employees." And then it was just off. Fights, cold wars for months. And that was pretty typical. It was pretty typical on and off for the first couple of decades.
Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your relationship without your man's conscious effort so that you feel desired, taken care of, and special, even if it feels hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today I'm talking about what to do if your husband leaves you because he was unhappy. My guest Michelle and her husband were sleeping in separate bedrooms and having cold wars that lasted for months. The threat of divorce felt heavy in their house. Then Michelle did a few unconventional things and the fighting stopped. Now her husband is as passionate as when they were first married. She's going to tell us how she did it so you can do it too. But first, here's what to do if your husband leaves you because he was unhappy, which is just devastating and so hurtful. First, he loved you enough to marry you in front of God and everybody, and then he was so unhappy he left you. That's not what he promised to do. And it feels like such a betrayal. Not only does it knock the wind out of you, he's the very person that you would turn to for comfort, but you're left to fend for yourself, which is incredibly scary and lonely. It could even make you feel unlovable and hopeless. But one thing I know for sure is that you can change the story even now. When my husband was avoiding me, or we were having a cold war with no talking for days, and I was afraid he was going to leave me because he was unhappy, I didn't think I could just write a happy ending to our story. I was too consumed with pain and fear. It turns out I just needed help. I needed encouragement and supervision, and also the right information. And I'm so grateful I got it because I wouldn't have the happy, fortifying marriage that I have now if I hadn't. That's why I care so deeply about providing encouragement and supervision for women who are where I was in the biggest heartbreak of my life. The name of this podcast is My Husband Left Me Because He Was Unhappy, because I thought that's what you might put into a search engine in the middle of the night if you were going through that. If that's how you found this podcast, I've been waiting for you. We've been getting ready for you. And this might sound contrary, but I'm pretty excited to show you how to fix your relationship better than new. I want you to know you have all the ingredients that you need to fix it, including a big breakdown. That creates a big opening in my experience. And even if it seems like he's not going to try or he's not going to give it a chance, I don't care about that. But also, and this is important, you're a seeker, you're a learner and a grower. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to me right now. And nothing can improve until you're ready. And since you're here, it seems like you are. Him leaving you because he was unhappy, that brought urgency and focus to this area of your life, just like my husband's silence and distance did for me. I remember it felt terrible, but like Maya Angelou said, I wouldn't give nothing for my journey now. Here are 3 steps you can take today to turn this nightmare around. So instead of feeling depressed and heartbroken, you feel loved and happy. Here's what to do. Number one, give your feelings their day in the sun. Give them their day in the sun. So if you're a mere mortal woman like me, then you are probably furious at him for leaving. Who wouldn't be? He just walked out on you, which is incredibly hurtful. And I remember I used to get so mad at my husband too. So mad. I would rage at him, which made him more distant. So I know it's more tempting than eating a fresh baked cookie from the oven to just let him have it, to punish him for hurting you, to even the score, and to make sure he knows he shouldn't mess with you. Who could blame you? But you and your husband are so intertwined that there's no way to punish him without punishing yourself too. There's a spiritual boomerang there. And if you unload on him with blame and criticism and shame, in my experience, it just comes right back on you. And you're already so vulnerable and raw right now. The last thing you need is more owie. You do need to be heard and seen and understood, especially now, especially you. Your feelings deserve their day in the sun, and you need empathy. Your pain is real. But your husband doesn't have to be the one who hears and sees and understands you. Not yet. Today you can get that from a friend or your sister or your imam or your mom or an AA sponsor or your rabbi or one of our certified relationship coaches. I like a certified coach best for this because she's not only going to be able to listen and empathize since she's been there herself, she'll listen from a place of standing for your marriage instead of possibly saying, well, you should divorce him. When you work with a coach, your feelings get their day in the sun, and you'll have an expert guide to help you turn this breakdown into a breakthrough. Number two, ask yourself how you'd show up today if you knew this. If you knew this. And this is a great time to set your intention. My favorite way to do that is to visit my future self and ask how everything turned out. And guess what? It all went my way. It's great. I say, how did everything go? And my future self from a year from now is like, it's so great. You are your ideal weight. Your coaches are serving more women than ever with making their marriages shiny and amazing. And girl, your defense in volleyball is really great. You know, I do a popular training about visiting your future self every March in the Ridiculously Happy Wife coaching program. And I want to give you a taste of that right now. And of course, there's so much more to it than I have time to go through on the podcast today. But here's a question to ask yourself. I invite you to try this. Okay. If everything went your way, how would your life be a year from now? How would your marriage be? All right. What would it look like? Maybe your husband would be home in your bed and your relationship would feel secure and it would even feel playful. Maybe your kids would feel relieved and overjoyed, and you'd feel more financially secure. Maybe you'd be watching movies together on the couch, holding hands. I'm just making these up. You know, you're going to write your own vision, but you get the idea, right? So write out how your life looks a year from now if everything goes your way. That's the invitation. Like, it's like putting the address in your GPS. This is where I want to go. And don't trip yourself up on how it's going to happen. All right. Just set the intention for your dream life. This is so vital. So pause the podcast and just write it down right now. I'll wait. And now ask yourself this powerful question. How would you show up differently today if you knew that this dream you wrote down was what was actually going to happen? How would you show up differently today if you knew this dream was going to come true? What would you do differently today? Would you feel more confident? Would you be more relaxed? Would you get back to the project you were enjoying that you're working on? Would you go out to lunch? Pause the podcast and write that down too. Pause it right now. All right. All right. Number three, find your happy place. Okay. I once asked my friend Omar, isn't it painful to get all those tattoos? And he said, yeah. But he said that it was also a spiritual experience for him. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, when I go to get a tattoo, I have to find my happy place. So he doesn't suffer when he's getting inked. He decides how he's going to feel, and he decides to feel happy. And that's a great metaphor for the emotional pain of your husband leaving because he was unhappy. You're in excruciating pain, and you can decide how you're going to feel. I know I just said that your feelings need their day in the sun, and that's true, but that might only be for a few minutes out of the day, right? You might feel them, they might rise and naturally subside. The rest of the day, you could watch comedies. You could listen to a podcast that you love while you walk in the park. You could cook your favorite recipe and eat it. You could salsa dance. You could go for a girls' weekend with your besties or whatever it is that makes you ridiculously happy, just for frivolous fun. Making yourself happy is indispensable for fixing your marriage, but also it's indispensable for having a life well lived. It starts right now, right in the middle of this big breakdown. If your husband left because he was unhappy, I'm sorry you're going through that right now. And I'm also so glad we found each other because that also happened to some of my favorite people in the world. And now they call themselves ridiculously happy wives, or they're certified relationship coaches. They have marriages that are beacons of hope for women who are struggling now. Imagine that. And they were where you are now. So there's a great adventure ahead with practicing the 6 intimacy skills. And I'm going on it. And I'd love for you to come too. If you're wondering how to get started with fixing your relationship and making it shiny again, then you need a roadmap. Get 6 simple steps to follow that will set your relationship up for success. Discover 3 common mistakes that wives make trying to fix their relationship that just make things worse when you download my free Adored Wife Roadmap. You can do that at getcherished.com. Go to getcherished.com now to get your roadmap in minutes. My guest, Michelle, and her husband were sleeping in separate rooms and having cold wars that lasted for months. The threat of divorce felt heavy in their house. Then Michelle did a few unconventional things, and the fighting stopped. Now her husband is as passionate as when they were first married. She's going to tell us how she did it so you can do it too. Michelle, welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, tell us what things were like in the battle days. What was going wrong?
There were a lot of years of bad old days. So I've been married for 28 years, and a lot of those were roller coasters. Not all bad, not all good, but increasingly worse. And when we met, we were really madly and passionately in love, the whole fairy tale thing. And within the first year, we had our first baby, and he had colic, and you know, life began. And I had always grown up with my mom. One of the things my mom taught me was to never depend on a man. So I was extremely independent. My dad passed away when I was 18. I put myself through school. So by the time I got with my husband, there was already a lot of control, a lot of independence, a lot of I can do anything. But it always felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders, but I couldn't let anybody know that. So I thought I had it all together, but I was just so exhausted. And I remember after our first child, breastfeeding him, and um, was within the first year, my husband came in the room, and there was some old debt that neither one of us were aware of. And I remember that as a turning point, because after he told me about this debt that it looking back wasn't a huge, horrible thing. I chastised him. I told him I could fix it. And as soon as, and if in order to do that, he would need to give me complete control of the finances. And I thought I could do everything, budget better, smarter, all the things. And he agreed, and we were off to the races with that control. So it was pretty fast.
Yeah. And you thought, well, I'm doing a good thing here. I'm obviously better at this than he is, or we wouldn't have this debt, and I'm going to be able to fix this. So, I mean,
Yeah,
you're just trying to help. Yeah.
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 Um, and then the next probably 2 decades, 20 years of our relationship, they were just this up and down roller coaster with power struggles over everything you can think of: money, parenting, family activities, when we would have sex, really pretty much anything. And there's a story that always goes into my mind as I have been practicing the skills. And my boys, we had 4 boys at the time. I came home from work. We both worked a lot of hours, and then would come home, and there was life things of taking care of the family. And I came home, things were a mess. Kids hadn't started their homework. Dinner wasn't started. I was late. And I remember I walked in the door, and I was a manager at work where I worked. And I was just used to taking charge of everything. And I walked in the door, and, almost like I was just this managerial person in my own home, started demanding my kids to put their backpacks away. And my husband, if he checked the mail, and chastised him, why didn't he start dinner? It was all ready. And I just was so superior. And I remember I was standing at the stove, and he told me, he rarely pushed me on things because it would usually end up bad. And he turned around and he told me, "You are going to stop treating me like I'm one of your employees, or we're going to have a problem." And instead of getting the hint, I remember snapping back at him in defense. "Well, if you would just do what you knew you were supposed to do, and I told you to do, then I wouldn't have to treat you like you were one of my employees." And then it was just off. Fights, Cold Wars for months. And that was pretty typical. It was pretty typical on and off for the first couple of decades. And I would usually win because it was, just looking back, just so much easier for him to just let me have my way than to listen to me nag and complain and just really not be a very nice person in many ways.
Mm. Yeah. Gosh, I relate to you so much, Michelle. I just remember feeling so exhausted too. And like, how is this ever going to change if I don't tell him what to do and he doesn't, get him to do it?
Yeah.
So it's painful. It's so tiring. I remember how
Yeah.
tiring that was. Yeah.
But all those years they had so much cost. And I don't think until I started the skills, I realized how much the cost was. I mean, I knew it was there. And, at home, because I was so controlling, I did the majority of everything. I did the cooking, I did the cleaning, I did the finances. I planned all the vacations, and it was just all on me. And if I look back, it wasn't like he didn't offer to help sometimes. But when he would offer to help, either I would think I was the only one that knew how to do it and say no, or I would go right behind him and redo it. I remember him folding a basket of towels when we first were married, and not folding them right, because there was a right way to do that even, and then going around the bed and showing him how to fold the towels. And I don't think he ever folded the towels again until I got the skills.
There are a lot of dirty towels in all those years, probably. Yeah.
If I wasn't folding them, they weren't getting done. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. And we worked a lot of hours. And I used to say a lot. I mean, my pat answer was, "We're really good life partners. We're really good life partners." We would work. We were both responsible adults. We would come home. We would make sure the kids were safe and happy. But anything past that, romance, dating, physical intimacy, had gone missing. It was rare, few and far between. But it was just really just this dreary um, drudgery of trying to get things done, but there just wasn't joy. The energy in my house was usually very, very heavy,
Mhm.
and it eventually started affecting even my relationships with my kids. It
Mhm.
was really hard.
I hear it. Yeah, I remember heavy energy around here too. How was it affecting your relationship with the kids?
Um, so, the activities stopped, family activities. The more I got exhausted, the more I worked. My husband would rather stay, uh, watch TV than spend time with me. It was like he just buried himself into that. And if we weren't fighting, he was giving me the silent treatment, refusing to talk, and I just felt like I failed. And my family was the most important thing to me. I really took my value because my relationship was so tough out of being a good mom. But in doing that, that control spilled over into that. I was very controlling about their grades, about everything in their life, the activities that they had, preachy almost about what you should do. And all of my children are boys. So they were little men. And it just didn't eventually, it just hurt the relationships really bad.
Sounds rough. Sounds painful. And you tell the story so accountably now, but you at the time you're doing the best you can, right? You're trying to raise those boys right, and you got a lot to teach them. And so at some point, you guys started sleeping in separate rooms, you and your husband.
Oh,
Is that
yeah. The last several years before I found the skills, they were fairly ugly. I forced us to go to marriage counseling a few times.
oh,
I
how'd that
remember
go?
the I remember not well. I remember the first time I had been seeing a counselor, and I spent so much of my time complaining about how my life would just be so much better if my husband would just cooperate with me. So my counselor, she encouraged me to invite my husband to a session. And looking back, just the fact that he went to the session was proof right there that he loved me. But in the session, he refused to talk, and that made me really angry. And I ended up sitting there complaining about him the entire time. And we fought even worse afterwards. The next time I went back to that counselor for my private session, what she had to say to me I didn't like because she told me I needed to work through my anger issues. So I never went back to that counselor again.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Um,
Gosh. Yeah, yeah. Ah,
so I found another counselor for us. And again, guilted my husband into going, and he went like a trooper. And this counselor also specialized in sex therapy. So I thought, oh, well, here we go. We can work on more than one thing at once. And he went again. He didn't talk, wouldn't say anything, but he did go. And I remember after about the third session, that counselor pulled me to the side and told me if I was ever going to have the relationship that I wanted, then I needed to leave. It was never
oh,
going to happen.
oh, I hate that. I get mad about that, as you know. Anyway,
Yes, I do.
okay.
So,
So here this guy is, he's going to these sessions, but yeah, it's not helping.
no,
Yeah, awful. So, and well, did you think about leaving then? Because the counselor said, I mean,
I thought about leaving numerous times, um, but it just wasn't an option for me. Even during the bad times, I loved my husband. He was the love of my life. I just thought I needed to fix him. And I thought if I tried hard enough, found the right recipe, then I could do that. So that wasn't an option.
hmm.
And there were good times mixed in. We worked so much and had so much to do that we made sure once a year we would go on a beach vacation that was at an adults only resort. And during that time, it was just magical. We would remember why we loved each other. There were no outside distractions. I would leave there with so much hope. And as soon as we got home, things were back to the way they were. And every time I got my hopes up, and it was just devastating. It was like my heart broke all over again.
So, on those vacations, though, you weren't trying to get anything done. You weren't trying to get anybody to school or get any towels folded or dinner on the table. And
Yeah,
so it was oh gosh, so you got like a glimpse of the life that you were were so desperately wanting to have with him
yeah.
on those
I was
vacations.
just focused on having fun.
Oof.
Not, you would think it would click, right? What's so different about this?
Well,
But it
but
didn't.
but you thought, well, you can't be on vacation all year without the kids, right? And you probably thought it
Yeah,
was that. So
yeah. So that pretty much went on for years, and then eventually, right about year 25, I just couldn't take the rejection anymore. Um, I, I I started getting more demanding about fixing it. I started getting more directive and complaining a whole lot more. I was miserable all the time and blaming him and telling him that if he should be making me happy, basically, and that if he would just try harder, we could fix this and all the things. And um, so our fights got uglier, and I moved into a separate bedroom. I just couldn't take the rejection, and the D word started flying around. If in order to keep any kind of peace, it was a Cold War. We just didn't interact unless it was a requirement, and it just was not a good way to live. And accused him of emotional abuse, emotional abandonment, and the whole time when I think back about it, he'd get angry at me, but he never left, and he never really, you know, did what I probably would have done if someone was saying all these things to me.
he's a loyal man. He's a
Yeah,
loyal husband,
very much so.
very committed. Mm.
And the whole time I mean, I was embarrassed. I felt like I was failing. I never told a soul. Even my mom, I never told a soul that I was having relationship problems. So if you would have looked at my life from a work or a social view with my kids, you would have thought we had it all together. I'm
Everything's
pretty
fine.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Which
I was,
I know how lonely that is and because you're kind of fretting in your mind, at least I was, right? Like, oh my gosh, is this even normal? Should I be putting up with this? Should I be leaving? What? Yeah. So nobody knew about your suffering, but you.
not,
Yeah.
not, not a soul.
Very lonely. So then what happened?
I think one of the biggest breaking points was our 25th wedding anniversary. And there was just something about that date that stayed in my mind for all of those years that, of course, by the time we got to our 20, it was a goal. And by the time we got to our 25th wedding anniversary, my thought was we'd have it all figured out. And I had these visions of either being whisked away to a nice romantic vacation or being with my family and friends, and my husband looking at me lovingly and saying I was the best thing that ever happened to him. And I had built this day up as monumental, and our 25th wedding anniversary came and gone went with sleeping in separate bedrooms and not a mention of our anniversary. And I was just devastated. And um, I I had found your book um, a little bit earlier than that, and I read it. I would try some of the skills to varying degrees, get a little bit of hope. Then I would mess up. Then I would say it wasn't fair that I had to do all of the work,
That's right. That's right. It's not
and
fair.
I would just go back to the normal, like something was going to change, the whole insanity. What's going to change if I don't change, right? So,
Wow.
um,
It's
and
tough though. That's tough to overcome that idea that, I mean, he's 50% responsible, of course. So why should you have to do everything? That's,
yeah,
yeah, it doesn't feel that way. Yeah.
And then shortly after that 25th wedding anniversary, that's when we had our breaking point. I was very hard to live with after that. I felt devastated and lonely, like my heart was broken and he was letting me down. And I remember this really bad night where we'd had an argument and um they kept getting meaner, meaner words, divorce words thrown around. And until then we would fight or get to the point where it was a cold war. And on this one, I was literally so miserable. I was curled up in the fetal position, sobbing on my bed, and he just left. He just he slammed the door and he left. And I remember when he left, there was just something that shifted. I'd always had this hope that we'd figure it out. And there was some kind of finality in the way he left the room that time. And so after he left, I cried for a little bit. And then I got up and I looked in the mirror and I was trying to figure out, I couldn't even remember where things had gone wrong at that point. I couldn't remember. And uh, the reflection that I saw looking back at me wasn't somebody I knew anymore. I didn't think I liked her. Definitely didn't like how she had just behaved. And I didn't know what to do. And there was this voice that came in my head because part of the book, was that your husband only wants to make you happy. And right before he slammed that door, his parting words were something along the lines of, we might as well just get divorced because there's nothing I'm ever going to be able to do that's going to make you happy. And it clicked. There was something that clicked. My guardian angel whispered in my ear, put that back in my mind. And I thought, well, this lady said that my husband wants to make me happy, but I never believed it. But those words just made me think about it again. And it was that very night that I went in all in with the skills. I went and found your book. I stayed up all night. I read the whole thing, but intentionally this time. I highlighted things. I wrote notes about it. I accepted the parts in the book that I knew I had done because there was probably nothing that you wrote in that book that I didn't do over the course of those years. And I decided, regardless of what else happened, I was going to take accountability. And
Wow.
that's what I set out to do.
So that was the breakdown before the breakthrough.
Yeah.
That pain's a good teacher in a way, huh?
Yeah.
And you didn't let it go to waste. Like, I'm gonna. So, and I just kind of hear this determination, kind of like in the movies when you see the hero go, like, I don't know, like Clint Eastwood or something's like, oh, okay, they took the baby or whatever. Like, and I kind of see that in you. Like you were determined at that point. Is that right?
It's definitely right. I was always very stubborn the way I grew up, that independence. That was finally one part of it that I think served me well in my relationship because I was going to do my best to try, and nothing else I had tried worked. So this was my step, and
Wow.
I'm so glad I did.
Oh, me too. Okay, so what was the first thing you did differently? I mean, even what you just described as the first thing, right? You read the book with I think, an open, accountable heart, right? Kind of a
Mhm.
vulnerability and a courage to take a look at yourself. What else did you do after that that was different than what you had been doing?
Pretty much everything, but I think I think I started with duct tape because there were so many. I was always teaching or telling or complaining and I decided the golden rule, and it's interesting because elsewhere in my life, I really believe I practiced. If I didn't have anything nice to say, I wasn't going to say something. but I felt like it was my right to say exactly what I thought, even if it was cruel in my relationship.
Maybe even your
So,
duty, right? To say it,
right.
right? Yeah.
You know,
Probably
all the
being,
books say you have to communicate, right?
you got it. You got it. Be honest. Have to. Yeah, you're supposed to. Yeah.
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 So started with duct tape. Um, I saw results immediately just with that. Things got peaceful, quieter, still distant. And then when we did talk, I started the respect, the I hear you, the whatever you think. And at first he would look at me like I was crazy, but he never questioned it like I hear some husbands do. I think he was so craving that he never really questioned it. He's
It's
like,
like,
"Oh,
come on.
finally."
Yeah. He's like, all right, this is great. So we're trying to figure out how it's happened. So, okay. Yeah. So he's looking at you like you're crazy. Okay, cool. And did that shake you at all? Did you think, okay, this isn't going to work in my relationship because he's not responding very
um,
well?
it shook me in the sense that I had always been so vocal that I saw improvement, and I was wondering how I was ever going to keep this up because those were the only skills I started with, and I still felt heavy and I had opinions and I didn't know what to do with them, and no one else knew what was going on in my relationship. Um, but the fact that we weren't fighting anymore gave me hope right there to keep going.
Yeah, I hear you, but it does sounds like it doesn't feel very sustainable at that point because
No,
you weren't feeling like you could say your piece, which you
no,
got to be able to do that, right? So yeah,
right,
okay.
right.
So then what
And
happened?
then the next thing I started playing with was gratitude. And that one was a big shock to me because I always felt like I was a really grateful person. I knew that I thanked people for things. I knew in my heart that I believed I was blessed. And when I really got into the gratitude modules and sections of the book, where my husband was concerned, other than thanking him if he did something, which I thought was monumental, I never really expressed true gratitude for all the things that he did. It had to be something big, or thank you for, you know, getting me a glass of water. And so when I dove into that one, I remember this time, probably about 3 months into the skills, he was out of town, and I had been working on my gratitude journal, and I decided that I was going to surprise him. And I took these hot pink post-it notes and I wrote all these gratitudes on it, and I put them across a double vanity mirror. And when he came home from his trip, which he was always exhausted, he came in to see all of these post-it notes and gratitude. And he came and hugged me with tears in his eyes. Yeah. And I realized, I think more than ever at that moment, how little I had expressed how grateful I was for this man. And he's still, what, 3 years later? I was cleaning the other day. He still has those post-it notes in his drawer.
Oh,
Yeah.
so sweet. What a magical moment. With
Yeah.
oh, from a fetal position, sobbing person on the bed
Yeah.
to take post-it notes.
Yeah.
That made you both cry, right? Made me cry too. Wow. Oh, I love it. And I mean, did it feel like a stretch to thank him? Because I mean, I think you had a long list of things he wasn't doing.
It did. It did. I had the whole um I kept score a lot, and I did so much around, I did so much. It was my choice. I now know to do so much, but I did so much. And I felt like by thanking him for things, it was almost giving him permission not to do more. And at first it was hard, but then the more I thanked him, the more he did. The more I thanked him, the more he did. And he started showing up more and more with just little things that I'd been wanting forever. And it was just so worth it. I mean, uh, he, these days he books our vacations. He surprised me a few weeks ago with a hotel at night, overnight at a place. I mean, he, he,
Just
he it's
just
just
for no
totally
occasion?
different.
Just like I'm whisking you away to a hotel? I just
I
want to be
thought
with
we,
you.
yeah, I thought we were just going for a date, like a dinner, and we had tickets to a show, and he he booked a hotel. I'm like, okay, here we go.
That's nice. It's romantic. So sweet.
Yeah, it was beautiful, and I think the last couple things that I played with were desires and SFPs. So the physical intimacy was one of the toughest things to get back because out of everything, that was the one thing that he maintained control over when I was so controlling. And so I slowly came up with spouse fulfilling prophecy. He can't keep his hands off me. I had to work my way up to that to, oh, he loves me. He loves to spend time with me. He loves to touch me. Then I just got bold and it was, you can't keep your hands off me. And anytime he would hug me goodbye or kiss me on the cheek or grab my hand, it was, oh, I love how much you can't keep your hands off me.
I love it.
And then pretty soon it was, behind Pats in the kitchen and teasing and flirting. And it's these days it's true. So it
So when you
works,
first
right?
started saying that, though, it didn't feel true at all. It felt
No,
like a lie.
it was a total bold-faced lie. And I had to find little pieces of evidence. If he brushed up against me in my mind, it was he can't keep his hands up.
Oh
And then
my
I just
gosh.
worked up from there.
Oh my gosh, you're a good detective for the experience you wanted to have instead of the one you didn't want to have where you were feeling neglected before
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And now, yeah, now it's true. We were talking about that a little before the call. And I said, "Oh, yeah, he can't keep his hands off of you." And you're like, "Yeah, like that just feels normal now. That doesn't feel like any kind of stretch.
yeah.
That's just
It's
the
just
facts, Jack."
that is just the fact, and I love it. Right, I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
What a
it
miracle.
it's better than before like since we were married. I mean, it really is. He's more passionate. He's more attentive. You know, I can't. So, my self care list. I can't find time to myself because he follows me into the rooms where I'm at. So, which is
Wow.
a wonderful thing to receive, but it's like, okay, I need a little,
I would like some solitude, please.
yes, please. Now I have to express the desire.
For some solitude. Come in. Oh, okay, okay. I'll leave you alone for a few minutes. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, what a turnaround. Now, did he ever acknowledge? I mean, this is a big change. You're a different person than what
Yeah.
you. Okay. So, did he ever say anything that had you know that he noticed?
He's a very quiet man, but he started saying he was proud of. And then that has evolved into thank you for all the work that you've done.
Wow.
It, just those phrases alone, they're just beautiful.
Oh gosh, that would make me feel like $1 million to hear those words. So, and I'm sure those are things you were longing to hear in the bad old days from him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And and then there would still be like these tug of wars as I was practicing the skills. I remember the as I was getting into it, it was so fun because I started getting excited. I was seeing traction. I'm like, oh, he wants to fulfill my desires. So my first Valentine's Day with the skills, I made out this whole list of desires. And I thought, well, surely he'll do something on it. It was all the things I had always wanted: a bed and breakfast, something with a fireplace, candlelight dinner, dancing. And I gave him the list. In my mind, I thought, well, if he does any of them, then that's a win. And surely he's going
That's
to
a
do
win.
something, right? And Valentine's came and went. Things were really great. I got flowers, but I didn't get anything on that list. So I was like, what did I do? What did I do wrong here? And then my birthday's in May. And he asked me what I wanted for my birthday. Things were good, but there was just still this that the really romantic things weren't coming. And I was wanting that good as you could stand. And I said, well, the same things that were on the list of Valentine's Day, I would love. And didn't get any of them. And our anniversary for our 26-year anniversary was in September. And by then, things were so good. I let go of that list. I didn't care a thing about that list. And everything on that list got done on my anniversary. As soon as I relinquished control of that list,
Oh,
everything got done.
okay. This is fascinating. I want to break this down a little bit because it sounded like you just expressed your desires purely with no expectations for Valentine's Day, but it didn't happen. And then for your birthday, it didn't happen. But something shifted by your anniversary. So what was it? What do you think?
As I really dug into the disappointment, I didn't expect everything on the list, but I expected something on that list.
Gotcha.
And I was still trying to control it. And he sensed that a mile away, and
He wasn't
it just
having it.
didn't happen. Wasn't going to happen. That's so, anytime I can totally let go of control, you are so right, Laura. Everything just comes into place. If it's not happening, I got to look back on my side of the street. Okay, what are you controlling? What are you doing? Something's going on.
Oh my gosh. And I mean, sometimes I'll fight with myself. I'm like, I wasn't controlling, like I'm not controlling it, but
Yeah.
the evidence is otherwise in my
Yeah.
relationship. So it's just a reliable indicator. So, okay. I mean, I hear like it sounds like just all of the skills. I mean, I hear expressing your desires and self-care and the gratitude and you started with the respect stuff and with duct tape and was there any skill that you tried that you thought, well, that just doesn't work or
I still struggle all these years later with vulnerability. Vulnerability is a tough one for me. And I can be vulnerable and emotional, and that can easily come. It's without any blame or shame or expectation. And if I can examine that part and know that it's clean, then that's good. Otherwise, it's really hard for me to go there. It's not my initial place.
gotcha. Well, that is still the toughest one for me too, so I can relate to you so much. So, so what is your relationship like now?
Oh, it's better than I ever thought it could be. It's playful, it's fun, it's romantic. We date now. He surprises me with things. At Christmas, he marched me into a jewelry store and wouldn't stop until I picked one of the nicest pieces of jewelry when I went in there. He's got a beach vacation that he booked for us this summer. Uh, He booked Niagara Falls for my birthday in May, which I've always wanted to do. I haven't lifted a finger. It's it's respectful. There's hope now. We talk about the future. We're happy. We're joyful. And it's not like I don't stumble. I mean, just last week we were tired. My self care was low. And we got into a little bit of words around who was going to pick up our youngest son from band. He had committed to do it. And he was, and I fell right into the bait. He's, he didn't give me enough notice. And I was stressed and afraid that I was going to have to let someone else down. And I started going right back at him, well, you should have given me more notice and all the things. And it lasted about 10 minutes. And then I took a deep breath and I apologized for being disrespectful when I was complaining and blaming him. And I walked out of the room because I was still aggravated and I didn't trust myself for the next step. And there were some mean words that were said in that few little minutes. And after I apologized, didn't get a reaction from him, kind of a grunt even. And then I went downstairs and started doing self care. And about an hour later, he came down and he apologized to me. And I thought things were wonderful and fabulous again, intimacy restored. I was done with it. The next day, around lunchtime, I got a text that said, I really am sorry for how I reacted last night. I do love and appreciate all that you do for our family. I was amazed. And then it's not over. And then that night, I got a dozen roses and another apology when he got home. And, and I was done, before I would have been really angry, but I was completely done with it. And here I got three apologies and roses out of the deal. It's like, should I go be a little crabby
I
sometimes?
think you should slip up more because it's really, I mean, and I just love this authenticity. I love hearing, like, it's not perfect, right? There's still mean things were said, right? You're not a perfect person. You're a mere mortal woman. And, but this sounds pretty great. I mean, it sounds pretty great. How sweet that he got you roses too. And he's so accountable. I mean, was he like that before?
I
Was he
can't remember
apologetic?
the man ever apologizing to me until I started practicing the skills and being accountable myself.
So he changed too.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. Wow. He became a better man, sounds like.
It, he shares with me now. He'll tell me when he's stressed. He has become a more compassionate father. I got out of the way of him parenting our boys, and he's just 1000% there for them, teaching them to become men, helping them, doing things around the house. I rarely do dishes anymore because that's my least favorite chore. I'd rather clean the toilet. So he takes care of all of that for me. It's just he folds the towels again.
Oh my gosh, he folds not the towels. I
The
draw the line at
towel.
the towels. No way. Not possible. I
Yep.
mean, it sounds like a fairy tale. It sounds almost too good to be true.
It feels that way sometimes. It
Wow.
does.
Now, what about your relationship with your sons? How has that changed? Or has it?
It has. It has a lot. They range in age from 30 to 15. So the older three are out of the house, and my oldest is my stepson or my bonus son, and we'd always had a loving relationship, but I really made an intentional effort to practice the skills with my sons after I started, really becoming accountable. I started apologizing to them. I issued each of my boys a Laura Doyle apology for things in the past that I was really not proud about. And um, the difference that has made, I mean, my 30-year-old stepson called me mom for the first time about a year and a half into the skills and still does. Openly hugs me, tells me he loves me. My next two, who I had to twist their arm to do anything with me, I get invited openly to things like the movies or symphony or mom, do you want to cook on Sunday? My One of them just bought a house, and instead of being uh, not part of that process, it was he wanted me with there the whole thing, house shopping, picking things out with him, and it, it's just so different. It's just amazing.
That must feel so good to have that connection with. So your whole family is really transformed. That's what I hear.
Yeah, even the holidays used to be a little bit miserable. We would have plans to cook and it, have plans to have a good time, and it would turn into, now I know, because of me controlling everyone else, just leaving me alone and me cooking in the kitchen and doing all the cleaning. The last two holiday seasons, we've laughed, danced, cooked together, cleaned together, planned the menu together. It's just totally different. It's And all because of these skills. I owe you so much gratitude for.
Oh, so sweet. I mean, what an incredible accomplishment because you're totally outnumbered. You're the only girl in the family. There's only boys. And you're saying the whole thing hinged on your how you showed up
Yeah,
these holidays. You really
yeah.
feel it was always within your power. You just didn't, no one had ever shown you how to make them, so they were full of dancing and cooking and cleaning together and having fun. But it was really always it was always up to you.
It was. The more and more I do this, if there's heaviness in my house, it's me I have to check in. It's how I'm showing up. It's almost like when I walk in a room and I never realized I had that much influence. They the men, my husband or if my boys are home, they look at it, they literally, I catch them now looking at me almost to gauge like what kind of, what's the war, what's it
How's the
going to
night
be
gonna
like?
go? How's
Yeah.
it gonna go tonight? Okay, don't you ever just think, no, they're in a bad mood. Like my son's in a bad mood or my husband's in a bad, like it's them this time.
I mean, I think everybody gets in a bad mood, but the thing I've realized is if I just keep being me and I just go about my way and have fun, then that bad mood passes really fast.
Wow.
They they'll come have fun with me. So,
Wow. That's crazy. That's amazing. So what would you say to a woman who is having cold wars, sleeping separate, there's no physical intimacy? She's in that fetal position, crying, sobbing, and her husband is saying we might as well divorce. And she wants what you have now, where he whisks her away to a show and books a hotel and does all the dishes and can't do enough for her, can't keep his hands off of her. And it sounds like divorce is off the table. It doesn't sound like that's
oh, yeah, no, that
no,
word hasn't been spoken yet.
in a long time.
Not since
Okay.
that night. Not since that night when
Not
I
since
got
that
that book
night.
again.
Okay. And she's got this great relationship with, she wants this great relationship you have with your kids. What's your best tip for her? What should she do?
I think the biggest thing is, if I think back, I was afraid to have hope, and it was that fear that drove my control. And I would I would encourage her to have hope and believe in the fact that these skills change lives, and you don't need to wait on anyone else. Everything you need in your power, in your control, just the way you show up. Grab onto these skills and just try. Just try and believe, and you will see the difference.
And did you ever get coaching or have any support, or you've just done all this yourself?
Oh no, I couldn't have done all of this myself. I tried. I tried for about the first 3 or 4 months, and that's when I had my Valentine slip up where I had control on my desires. So shortly after that, I started. I joined Ridiculously Happy Wives. Oh, that is the best program. I listened to every call that I could possibly get on. I didn't have close friends, and they definitely didn't know about my relationship. And that was like, even without speaking to those women, it was like I knew them. I could relate to them. We had the same stories in so many ways, even if it wasn't exact. And just that sisterhood and not feeling alone, and the encouragement from the coaches, and just knowing I had that to look forward to. If I was having a bad day, just listening to one of those group calls, that's all I needed. It gave me encouragement. It gave me hope. Okay, start again. You might have messed up a little bit. Start again. And
Yeah.
then along the way, I did buy some private sessions when I got into just little blind spots where I just couldn't seem to push past it. And that was amazing experience. Um, and then, it just kind of, I couldn't believe the miracle that I had. And I wanted so much accountability that I, the biggest way to immerse yourself into all of this is to go into relationship coach training. And that's what I did.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, you're going to be a fantastic coach. I mean, yeah. I mean, this is such an incredible story.
Thank you.
What do you think you would say to Michelle if you could go back and tell her what you know now?
Oh, I would say there's a term that always comes to my mind that you don't have to do, you don't have to hustle for your work. It's not about teaching or telling or doing or trying to be perfect. It's about just being you, focus on you, make sure you're accountable. You don't have to be in this alone. It's not too late. There's hope. And if you will just relax into these skills and have a grateful heart and take it step by step, then your miracle is possible.
You are living a miracle for sure. I just hear it all over you, and I just want to acknowledge you by giving you my wife
Oh,
award.
thank you.
Best wife. It's such an incredible accomplishment, Michelle. I mean, there's six people whose lives are forever changed, right? There's a whole family, a warm, happy family, in the place where there was a lot of loneliness and dejection and fear. And you totally turned it around, and you did it single-handedly. I could really hear in the story, like you just looked to yourself. What can I do differently in this situation? And you did. And it's just incredible. You're just a beacon of what's possible. This romantic relationship that you've created. I mean, if you can do it, then you
Mhm.
know anybody can do it, right? I mean, it can be a little tricky to do it by yourself, but you didn't. You got support, and anyway, it's just the most impressive thing I can think that anybody can do. So I wanted to congratulate you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for sharing this inspiring story with us. It brought tears to my eyes several times, just describing the connection and the gratitude and the love that you've created.
The biggest accomplishment, if I look at it, I'm so grateful for everything in my family, but I found me again. I found my happiness. I found my joy. I found my confidence. I found me again. And that was gone for so many years.
So if you were to look at that woman in the mirror that compared to when you looked at her after you'd been crying that time in the bed after your husband left, you would see yourself again.
Yeah. It's, say she's a mere mortal woman, but she's accountable.
Yeah, and beautiful and lovable. Like there's so many things that um yeah, I see the confidence on you and just the joy and the enthusiasm and the passion uh for this. And I just love that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You're
Thank you.
changing lives.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. This has been great.
Thank
According to a study at Harvard, and this was horrifying to hear, if you know a couple who's getting divorced, you are 75% more likely to get divorced too. Woo! It matters who you listen to, which is why over 7,000 women like you who think that having a great marriage is important have joined our free Adored Wife group. The Adored Wife group is a launch pad where you can meet our certified coaches and discover the best next steps for making your marriage last and thrive. It's 100% free to join. Just go to lauradoyle.org/group right now. This is a private group and it's not for everybody, but if you are a wife or girlfriend who thinks that having a great marriage is important too, we'd all really like to meet you. So go to lauradoyle.org/group right now to join us free. That's lauradoyle.org/group. Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. On next week's podcast, we're talking about signs your husband resents you and what to do about it. And in the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that the Empowered Wife podcast has been downloaded over 4 million times. This means that you have been sharing it with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and from what I hear, women you just met, complete strangers. I see you. I am so onto you. I see what you're doing. And I want to thank you for your passion and your enthusiasm for sharing this podcast and for the way you've been helping end world divorce. Thanks for spreading hope and inspiration to women who are struggling because no one ever taught them the 6 intimacy skills before. And thank you for listening every week. I'm so grateful for our time together.